Ivar's son has finally been born. During her pregnancy, Freydis promised Ivar that their child would be a flawless godsend and named the baby Baldur. After Freydis gave birth smoothly, Ivar showed unprecedented happiness. However, Ivar's smile faded the moment he saw the child, as the baby boy was also born with a disability. Freydis, on the other hand, saw it as a miracle, claiming the baby inherited Ivar's traits, and even tried to convince Ivar that both father and son were divine. But Ivar wasn't fooled. He knew the child was someone else's. Yet, as a king, he could not let people suspect his infertility, nor could he be without an heir. Had the child been without flaws, it would have been a perfect ending to their story, but the child was also disabled, and Ivar didn't want his son to relive his own tragedy, to live amidst cold stares and mockery. So Ivar followed the example of his father, Ragnar, and left the child to die in the middle of nowhere. When Freydis discovered the child was missing, she was furious with him, but Ivar thought the child was far from the perfection Freydis had promised, so he was done playing along with her act.
Where is my baby?
Later, the hunters see the remains of a baby in a fox den, which Freydis assumes is the abandoned baby. Freydis was deeply disappointed in Ivar. After all her sacrifices, this was how he treated her. But before Freydis could finish, Ivar couldn't hold back any longer.
Is he really my son? Was he? You see, I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not sure that poor crippled bastard was my son. Was he? Oh. You lied to me. You lied to me.
Ivar finally exposed Freydis' lies. Freydis has been bragging about him the whole time. Ivar had enjoyed the adulation, until the birth of the disabled child shattered all his illusions. Meanwhile, in Wessex, Lagertha began recalling her post-war experiences. After Hemun's death, Lagertha, with her injured leg, fled the battlefield. She had hoped to live as a farmer, but found herself constantly caught in battles and killings. She had grown weary of such a life. A kind-hearted witch doctor found and saved her, believing Lagertha's narrow escape from death marked a new beginning for her. The witch doctor helped her cut off her long hair. Friends often remarked that Lagertha never seemed to age, largely because she hadn't faced significant hardships. After losing Kattegat and 2 loved ones, the once radiant queen had finally lost her former luster. Not long after, Judith died from a worsening illness. Her affair with Athelstan and the birth of Alfred had cost her an ear, but protecting the future king became her sole mission. As Lagertha said of Judith, although she did not wield weapons, she fought in her own way. Now that Alfred had secured his throne, Judith's mission was complete. On another note, Bjorn and Gunhild's wedding was completed. Harold could be considered the most magnanimous man. He watched the woman he loved marry someone else, provided them with the venue and resources, and even personally led the troops to help Bjorn attack Kattegat. Their fleet then set sail for Kattegat, but a storm along the way cost them many ships, infuriating Harold. Harold had planned to wait until after the stormy winter season, but Bjorn, impatient and believing in the gods' protection, pushed forward, resulting in significant losses. If it weren't for Bjorn's stubbornness, they wouldn't have lost so many ships. Harold thinks it's not worth it to cooperate with Bjorn. The woman is his, the throne is his, so he might as well cooperate with Ivar, who promises to give him the throne when he dies. The conversation got worse and worse, and they got into a fight. Gunhild intervened to stop the two men.
So why do you fight now? If you have to, fight later. Fight about Kattegat, or whatever else you want to fight about.
After hearing Gunhild out, they realized their immaturity. Meanwhile, Ub finally awoke, and Torvi told him nearly 3,000 Danes had been settled in East Anglia, all thanks to him, but Ub is preoccupied. In the final stages of the duel, it was the gods and the father who answered his call and made him victorious, and the Christian god gave him no indication of what to expect. So, he decides to leave this place and return to his true homeland to once again worship the gods. Seeing Ragnar's wishes fulfilled, Lagertha also decided it was time to return home, so they bid Alfred farewell and started their journey back. Outside the walls of Kattegat, Fitzurk and Bjorn unexpectedly met. After everything they had been through, the brothers stood together once again. This is the Blood Feud 2.0, the finale of Season 5. Friends often asked how Vikings could tell friend from foe in battle. It seems the director heard their queries. As this episode provided a distinction, the siege strategy involved dividing the troops to attack the city's two main gates from the left and right. Bjorn and Olaf led the white troops, while Harald and Hvitser commanded the blue troops. Before going to war, Ivar wanted to be forgiven by Freydis. She was the only one who could make Ivar apologize. Now that his brothers have turned against him, Freydis' understanding as his only remaining relative is vital to him.
I love you, Freydis.
And I forgive you. And I love you too.
After Ivar took power, Kattegat's defenses were continuously upgraded, giving him confidence in repelling the attackers. The battle officially began with Bjorn leading the assault team straight to the city gates. Facing Bjorn directly was Ivar, who, under his command, had the archers unleash a barrage of arrows.
Archers!
On the other side, with the launch of 2 rockets, Harald initiated their attack. Since Floki's departure, their siege equipment was rudimentary at best. Battering rams, ladders, ropes, and poles, without even a catapult in preparation. Nonetheless, the agile Hvitser was the first to scale the walls using a pole. Magnus, though claiming to be Ragnar's son, showed none of his previous bravery and prayed to God from under a cart. The arrival of the defense pavilion for the battering rams seemed timely, but Ivar had a countermeasure ready. As barrels of boiling oil were poured down, the siege's climax was just beginning, with warriors giving their last strength even as they were engulfed in flames. Witnessing this fratricidal scene, Olaf began to sing a passage from Twilight of the Gods.
Upon a shore of corpses, broken heads, spilled guts, scorched flesh, come and see the young tearing each other's throats out.
On the other side, Ivar's lieutenant, White Heir, showed exceptional bravery. Despite having only one eye, his combat skills were formidable. After killing several enemies, White Heir even knocked Harald's weapon away with a single stroke. To save his life, Harald had no choice but to jump off the wall, and even with a pole to break his fall, he was severely injured. Seeing the tide turn, the clever Hvitser immediately climbed down the wall using a rope. He asked Harald if it was time to retreat. As their current tactics clearly wouldn't breach the city, Harald wanted to wait a bit longer, hoping Bjorn might succeed, as he was still striving to breach the city gate. But Ivar had more tricks up his sleeve. They brought out a large bellows and started to fan the flames towards Bjorn's team. However, Bjorn and his siege team, despite the arrows and flames, finally managed to break through the city gate. But as they rushed in, they found the enemy had already set up a defensive stance at the entrance. The closing of the second gate cut off their forces like a guillotine, a trap designed by Ivar. The warriors who rushed in with Bjorn were like turtles caught in a jar. It was then that Bjorn despairingly realized that against Ivar's cunning and strategy, his bravery was worth nothing. As wave after wave of arrows rained down, Bjorn's warriors were slaughtered. Gunhild was hit by a stray arrow while climbing, but for the sake of rescuing her husband, this minor injury was negligible. Bjorn seized the opportunity to break through the encirclement, leading the few remaining warriors up the stairs and escaping with Gunhild's cover. Meanwhile, Magnus finally remembered he was Ragnar's son. Under Odin's protection, he believed he was invincible. Magnus then charged towards the city wall, ready to make a last stand, but was pulled back by Harald, who had ordered a retreat. Harald had always thought Magnus was an English spy, only realizing his mistake today. Magnus said he had just realized who he really was. He wanted to declare he was Ragnar's son, a descendant of Odin, but before Magnus could finish, Whitehair's arrow pierced through his chest. Whether Magnus was truly Ragnar's son wasn't important. What mattered was he always believed he was. So, would Bjorn and Harald simply accept defeat? Did they still have a chance to turn the tables?
You were the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me. I will always love you.
The defeat in this siege battle stirred a complex mix of emotions in Bjorn: anger, sorrow, and a sense of helplessness. So, with tears in his voice, Bjorn played the emotional card with his warriors.
We played together when we were children. I am not your enemy. Ivar is your enemy.
Bjorn spoke the truth, so the archers refused Ivar's command to shoot him down. Ivar snatched a bow and arrow to shoot at Bjorn himself, but fortunately, Bjorn was quick to block the arrow. After the battle, Ivar hanged those who disobeyed his orders. He told everyone he was willing to die for the people of Kattegat, but this required their loyalty in exchange. If they couldn't even offer that, they should be prepared to join him in death. Meanwhile, the defeated group returned to their camp, undeterred. Bjorn tries to keep attacking, but Olaf doesn't think they have any chance of winning. He thought every tactic they could imagine would be easily countered by Ivar. Harald also saw no point in continuing the fight. Combined, their brains were no match for Ivar's, especially now that they had lost more than half of their manpower. Taking advantage of Ivar's celebration, Freydis secretly visited the allied camp at night. She revealed all of Ivar's misdeeds, including burning Thora alive, killing her newborn child, among other atrocities. Freydis hoped they could stop Ivar and was willing to help the Alliance invade Kattegat.
Thank you.
I want to see Ivar strung up in a tree.
At dawn the next day, Freydis opened a secret gate for the Alliance, a hidden passage designed by Ivar for escape. This effectively tore open a breach in an otherwise impregnable fortress, allowing the Allies direct access to Ivar's stronghold. That's why the emphasis on Ivar's apology is so important. Although Freydis appeared to forgive him, no mother could truly forgive the murderer of her own child. When Freydis returned home, the battle horns were already sounding. Freydis played dumb, telling Ivar that the enemies were attacking the walls again. Ivar scoffed at them for wasting their effort, unaware that the enemy was drawing nearer. After killing a few resistors, Bjorn ordered everyone to stop fighting. He came to settle accounts with Ivar, not to have innocent people sacrifice their lives.
Stay inside! Don't fight us! We are here to set you free! Ivar!
Seeing this, Ivar knew that the tide had turned and he realized that there was a traitor in his midst. Then under the cover of his escort, Ivar chose to go. But before he could escape, he had to deal with the traitor first. Only he and Freydis knew about the secret passage, and Freydis readily admitted to her actions.
I will always love you.
Ivar couldn't tolerate betrayal and strangled Freydis with his own hands, even though she was his beloved. Ironically, Freydis once strangled the man who borrowed her seed in order to get to the top, and now she's lost her throne in the same way. The fight outside the door was not over yet. Ivar's guard showed extraordinary combat skills, being the best of the best. At that moment, a berserker pressing a giant axe against Bjorn's body overwhelmed him, and Bjorn alone could not turn the tide. Harald watched, torn over whether to help Bjorn. After all, if Bjorn died, Kattegat and Gunhild would be his. Ultimately, Harald decided to help, only to be stabbed by an enemy. Fortunately, the wound was not fatal. By the time they entered the king's house, Ivar had long since fled, leaving Freydis in the bedroom, along with a few pieces of the baby's skeleton. Though they had only met once, Freydis' sacrifice moved Bjorn. Without her, the Alliance would have had no chance of victory. Freydis gave Ivar, who had been mocked and humiliated from a young age, a warmth he had never felt before. Yet, she was also the key to his loss of the kingdom. Bjorn officially took over Kattegat, and coincidentally, Ub and others arrived home at this time. Lagertha's arrival was a delightful surprise for Bjorn.
You're alive.
And here's the sword of kings. Hail King Bjorn, King of Kattegat.
A mother-son reunion, brothers coming together, defeating a formidable enemy, and being crowned king. It was indeed a perfect ending to Season 5. As Bjorn sat alone on the peak of Kattegat with the king's sword, his father's teachings resurfaced.
Power is always dangerous. It attracts the worst and corrupts the best. Power is only given to those who are prepared to lower themselves, to pick it up.
What exactly was the doom Ragnar spoke of, and how would it descend upon them? See you in Season 6.